the house for us, and that's a story in itself and has to do a little bit with the subject I've been asked to talk about. We had been looking up high, as he put it, and finding nothing, because I was saying, we don't want a two-story house because my husband has a problem walking upstairs. We don't want a big house because there are only two of us. We don't want a big garden because we don't want to have to take care of it. And we don't want a pool. And so this was apparently an impossible thing to find up high. So when we got back from that trip, I said to my real estate lady, who had been so patient for several years, we'll try again. And she said, well, you're going to have to let go of some of these do's and don'ts because I can't find anything. And I said, okay. So she looked again, we looked again, and it was devastating. The places she showed us were impossible, and my husband did not want to move from the beach, and so I had to find something that he really liked. And finally she said, well, a friend of mine who's in the same office with me has found a house, has a house on, but it's not for sale yet, it's in probate. Would you like to see it? My husband said, no, no more. And a little voice in my head said, yes, see it. So the woman was very nervous, and she whipped us through it very, very fast. And we thought it seemed a little large. But when she opened the door, throughout the entire house, including the bathrooms, were carpets the exact color of that soft orange that Swami uses for his robes. So it looked as if Swami were lying down all over the house in every room. So there was no doubt that this was the house for us. But we went through very, very fast because this poor woman was very nervous. And eventually, of course, it worked out that we were able to buy it. And then we decided, before it was completed, that we'd better go in and take some measurements. And to our absolute astonishment, in our hurry through the house, we'd overlooked an entire room. So it was even bigger than we expected. And here I was teaching the Sealing on Desires program. And I thought, Swami, how come? What's this all about? I don't seem to be practicing it. But I've discovered during the years since then that we have to bow to his will. We can't set our standards. I had set all these restrictions. And that's not the way he wants us to be. He wants us to say, his will, not ours, and his time, not ours. When I was there for the birthday after my husband died, in the group interview, Swami was joking and telling stories and looking at us all in his impish way, because sometimes he sees us there so serious, and I'm sure he feels, well, if he just pricks us a little bit, perhaps we'll lighten up. And then, so he was joking, and then all of a sudden, he swiveled around so that he was facing me, and with his piercing eyes, piercing mine, he said something which is indelibly imprinted on my consciousness, just like it was printed in acid in an etching. He said, wait for Swami, Mrs. Krystal. And this is a profound message. It's not just then, I was waiting for him. What else can you do in an interview? You have to wait for Swami. So it didn't apply that moment, but it's an incredible message if you think about it. We're always in a rush. We always want to get everything done fast. Everyone wants something to happen yesterday rather than today or tomorrow. We hate to wait. We get a plan in our heads and we want to push it through. And sometimes it reminds me of a little boy seeing an apple tree and seeing the green apples on the tree and thinking how wonderful they look. than picking an apple and eating it and getting a horrible stomach ache. And that's the way so many of us are. So, to go back to what he said, his life is his message, but then he continues that sentence. He says, but so should all of your lives be Swami's message. And this is a big responsibility. We don't have to be perfect all at once, thank goodness, or I would have run away long ago. It's a gradual process, because if it's not a gradual process, if we hurry it too much, then it's like hothouse growth. It can't withstand stress. And there's an enormous amount of stress in the world. And when he promises us that he's going to accelerate our karma, it puts us under further stress. And my life recently, during the last few months, has been one stress after another. But when we really do rely on Swami, and we do wait for him, we wait for his timing, and we try to the best possible, to the best as is possible for us, to put his teachings into practice, then we find that somehow or other we can go through what seem to be impossible situations. And even though it hurts, and it's very painful, and it's very stressful, somehow or other there's a knowing that everything is okay. So he wants us to infect the world, or be like yeast in this great big lump of dough, and raise the consciousness, not deliberately, not trying to do it, but as he does, letting his life attract people. So he doesn't want us in a forest. He doesn't want us to escape into a desert. That was the past discipline. He doesn't want us on a mountaintop. We're living in times which are getting more and more difficult, and he wants us wherever our life puts us. And sometimes that is right in the middle of the most materialistic part of the world, just as Los Angeles is. To continue on the story about my having to stay in Los Angeles, he has further completely amazed me and the other people to whom he has spoken, because he has told several people, starting with Isaac Taggart, to move to Los Angeles so that they could work with me. And I thought, oh, please, Baba, I have enough to do. Don't move people here. But obviously, he wants to make cities like that a hub or a place where his message, his life, his way of living, his teaching can begin to be worked out, because none of us is doing it. None of us is living like he does. But we're all in the process, and we're all at different stages, so we can't criticize one another. In this life at some point, we might have gone a long way on this inner path, in one direction, perhaps learning patience, whereas somebody else might have been learning something completely different. Because we've had many lifetimes to learn to deal with the world. So he seems to want us in specific places, and sometimes he specifically tells us, like these poor people who've had to sell their houses and move to Los Angeles, which they didn't particularly like to do, because he has some reason for it. And it looks to me as if some of these very difficult places in the world are where he wants his devotees. For instance, as you know, we had a perfectly horrendous earthquake in January. Well, when I was in India with him in November, I said to him, do you want me to sell the house now that I'm alone, now that my husband is no longer with me in the flesh? And he said, no, don't sell the house, don't move. Then he said, it's good for your grandchildren. So I had to stay there. And then when the earthquake hit, we were all asleep. It was 4 a.m, and it was the most horrendous one that we have ever experienced. I've lived in Los Angeles since 1937, and we've had many, many, many earthquakes, but nothing like this one. And the fault, which was the new one, goes right under our house. So I woke up, thank goodness, screaming to Baba. I think he must have heard me in India. At least he heard me in my own heart. So obviously he wanted us there, not because we're special, but because he uses us. We're the people who are going to be bringing in the new age, particularly the young people. He has to have us live his message in the middle of the most materialistic world in which we live now. So there isn't any escape, not if we listen carefully to what he's trying to teach us. We have to live wherever he puts us, wherever our life dictates. And the other thing he has taught from the very beginning is that we have to live according, we have to dress, we have to live according to our status in life. And I made an enormous mistake when I first went to see Swami. I had no idea what we were supposed to do, none whatsoever. We were completely green. We didn't even know where he'd be. And people kept telling us, you may not even find him. He's maybe in a different city. But we were willing to look. And so my thought was, well, if we're going to an ashram, we should dress down. We should dress very, very simply. I shouldn't wear any makeup. I should be just blend in, perhaps more like a sadhak. So I bought the cheapest possible saris I could find, drip dry, because they were easy to take care of. And we had been invited into Swami's house before this new one, the old one, where there was a veranda, and the ladies sat on one side and the men sat on the other. And I was sitting next to a young teenager whose parents were there. They were from New York. She must have been about 15. And Swami came tripping down his staircase from his room one day, and he stood right in front of me and looked very frowning, first at this young girl and then at me. And he said, Mrs. Krystal and this young girl have on the same sari. How strange. And I hadn't a clue as to what he meant. And then a woman whom I'd known for quite some time and hadn't expected to see at the ashram came up to me later, and she said, I hear that Swami did the same thing to you that he did to me. And she told me that one day he had said to her, Mrs. R always, I won't mention her name, always looks very nice when she's at home in California. She always wears very attractive clothes, has her hair done very nicely, and wears makeup and looks beautiful. But when she comes to see Swami, I got the point in a big hurry. Thank goodness, sometimes I don't get the point for years. This time I did. So I went out, and of course what I was dying to do, I love color, and I was dying to get some of the pretty saris I saw the Indian ladies wearing, but I'd been afraid to. So I wore the one that I had bought the next day, and of course there we were in the house again and again. Swami came tripping down the stairs, and his face lit up when he saw me, and he said, Today, Mrs. Krystal looks very nice. So that was my